Rock and roll.
Wonderful. Okay. So what I wanted to do is sort of explain what the goal, what the vision was when we started the church, uh, what happened, and maybe how we should have done it differently so that you can understand why your missional community group operates the way that it does. And also, so you can understand better maybe why we're wanting to have these calls to give you a new vision for missional community and maybe understand why we're having these conversations to begin with. So this is something that I've been processing, thinking through for the last 6 months. Had some time of confession and trying to figure out over the last few weeks, and then because I was burdened by it, and then actually got some fresh language to kind of express that and put it together for you this week. So let me see if you guys can see me here. We'll use the whiteboard. Can you guys read that? It'll be good enough. All right.
Good enough.
And so what most people try to do when they talk about planting a church is what they want to do is the goal is we're going to come in, we're going to plant a church so we can then make disciples who will eventually engage the city with the gospel. That's what 99% of churches use as their church strategy, as their model. And there are a few problems with this. So if you were to ask most people, this sounds pretty good. But what this creates is the cult of personality. So it becomes centralized around a single leader. And as soon as you start a Sunday gathering, it's like the tail wagging the dog because you have to sustain that Sunday gathering. And so when you have to sustain something, it takes a lot of energy, which leads to church planter or pastor and their spouse burnout. And this works in the Bible Belt. This will work in suburban areas throughout the South and the Midwest, but it doesn't work very well in the West, as Todd could probably tell you, and it doesn't work overseas very well. But this is sort of the build it and they will come model. And it's not a very biblical missiology. So if you actually look at the Bible and what happens, what you have is Paul and Jesus as two examples. They come into an area and they engage the city with the gospel. And as they engage the city with the gospel, they begin to then make disciples. And eventually what it says is it says actually in Matthew 28 that Jesus will build his church. So totally different thing. Instead of trying to come in and plant the church, you just engage the city with the gospel to make disciples, and then Jesus is going to build the church. What we tried to do, so those are kind of the two things, 99% of the way that people do it versus what actually happens in lots of scripture. What we tried to do is we said, hey, we want to make disciples so we can engage the city with the gospel and then hopefully, eventually, plant the church. And that was working really well until what happened in 2020? COVID hit. And so we were making disciples, we were engaging the city, COVID hits, shuts the whole world down. And then guess what? A lot of the things that we were doing to engage the city, we could no longer do. So we saw that there was a felt need for what? Community. Everybody felt isolated. People were aware of their own mortality. People were scared. And so what they actually needed was a church. And so we began to have so many people in community that we planted the church. And then because we planted the church, I spent and our team spent all of our energy sustaining the Sunday gathering. We started a second community group. We didn't have the energy, the time, the resources, all that stuff to really train community group leaders well, missional community leaders. So we've spent the last, 2 years now perfecting building the church so that we can make disciples and then engage the city for the gospel, which is very upside down. So we ended up accidentally doing the thing that most churches do. And what we want to do, so we're finally to a point where we have enough staff and team and resources around us that we can sustain our Sunday gathering. And so instead of spending all of our energy and being super inward focused, trying to make disciples for the next 100 years, what we want you to get is a vision for engaging the city with the gospel through your missional community group. And while we do that, we're going to make and multiply healthy disciples, and Jesus will build this church. And so as we talk through the 3 essential discipleship structures today, you can kind of place them in various places in here, and there's some overlap. So, making disciples happens in all 3. But you can also say, hey, a lot of building the church and planting the church is really just people talking about the Sunday gathering. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a big picture kind of thought process representation of all of that, maybe so that we could then discuss all of your questions, talk about what you read, all that good stuff. So I'll just turn it back over to y'all now.
That's great. Let me comment on a few things there. That was good stuff. Before we do a little review from last time. One thing you guys need, I'm assuming this is true of you, but you tell me, but well, first of all, what percentage of people in Oklahoma City or in your area, what percentage of people are in a church on a given Sunday? Any idea? Guess, doesn't matter if you're...
I don't know the percentage. I know that 60% of the people would be in the none or done category. So 40% of people claim that they're Christians. Not that many are in a church on a Sunday.
Okay. So yeah, so we'll say that was what I was going to guess, at least 60 to 70%. And so part of why I hope you're doing this and why you're structuring your church in this way to be a missional church, not an attractional church, is that most of the churches in Oklahoma City are not going to reach that 60 to 70%. That's a lot of people. Those people are not going to show up at a church no matter how cool it is or how whatever it is. They're not going to. And so if we don't plant more churches that are going to go, which is what it means to be missional, is to go with relational intentionality out into all the parts of the city, all the neighborhoods and the pubs and the restaurants and the parks and all those places to pursue people. 60 to 70% are never going to have any clue about Jesus. You could go the other direction and be one of those traditional attractional churches in Oklahoma. But those churches pretty much just shuffle around church people. So you got the 30% that are shuffling between churches, depending on the kids ministry, the youth ministry, the worship. You know how it goes. You might have done a bit of that. I won't ask that, okay? You might have done a bit of that, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So, but I hope you've got this growing passion and vision to say, man, we want to be a church that is going to reach that 60%. Even if it's slow, even if it's stinking hard work, even if it costs us dearly, we're going to be that church. We're going to be one of those churches because we need a whole lot more of those churches. People that like church, that grew up in church or whatever, they're going to find their flavor out there in Oklahoma City. Okay? We don't have to worry too much about them. We've got to worry about the 60 to 70%. Here in San Diego, it's probably 90%. Okay? We've got to worry about those people and them having an opportunity to be introduced to Jesus and introduced to genuine Christ followers and people that they can look at and say, wow, Jesus seems like has really changed their lives. Look how they go to work. Look how they go to school. Look how they raise their kids. Look how they, hang out. Look like There's something different about them. There's a different quality about them. That's what you need a whole lot more of in Oklahoma City. So, so I wanted to say that bit, and you guys can comment on that. Actually, I'll let you right now. Any thoughts or comments about that? Or you can just say amen or give me a thumbs up. Okay, 2 thumbs up, even better. Okay, we're good. Okay, one practical thing, and so we're talking about these 3 different disciple making structures tonight, and one thing I wanted to say about Sunday before I lose it, and because I think it's connected with some of what you just said there, Tyler. And man, so easy to just let Sunday take too much time. Is Sunday valuable? Yes. So don't hear that at any point in today's conversation. Do we need Sunday? I believe we do. Does it play a specific role? If you read what I sent you, it does. Okay. Certain things get accomplished there that can't be accomplished anywhere else because of the nature of a larger relational environment. So, but most churches, and I work with a lot of churches and a lot of churches all over the world, they spend too much time making it happen. Don't become one of those. If you've already become one of those, I want to challenge you to dial it back. Dial it back before it's too late. Okay? You can do Sunday well. You actually can do Sunday very well. Simpler, cheaper, less man hours, less volunteers. So if it's taking more than like a third of your budget, a third of your manpower, it's too much. So that'd be a good thing for you to assess. How much volunteer, how many man hours is it taking to pull Sunday off? What about our budget? What about Tyler's time? What about, you know, if it's taken more than a third, it is going to steal from the health, the growth, the influence of your missional communities. It's going to steal from that. You don't want to steal from that. If you're going to reach that 60 to 70%, you've got to have the hours and the manpower and the energy to be able to get out, go after people, love them well, serve them well, influence them well. But it ain't going to happen if some of your best people are bogged down making Sunday happen. So I hope I'm preaching to the choir here. Okay. But I wanted to say, man, a 30-year time, if it's more than that, I think you need to find ways to dial it back. So it was really fun for me because this last Sunday, I had some old friends from the Midwest visit our church here in San Diego. And they had visited 4 other churches previous Sundays before they visited ours. And they said yours was such a breath of fresh air. Because we went to some big mega type churches, we went to some other churches, and they just said, man, you guys did it simple, but it was so powerful how genuine the worship time was, and then how Jesus focused the preaching was. So it was just it was really fun to hear that from an outsider, first time there, comparing it to some other churches they'd seen recently, and just because again, we do it, you could say it's on the simpler side. Sunday we had one guy leading worship up there. Just one guy only took his time. So we don't do that every Sunday. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3, but our musicians share responsibility for it in such a way that most of them are only helping once a month, so that they're freed up to do all the other stuff, relational work we want to get done. Same thing with our kids ministry. Super well done. Super well done. But almost nobody connected to the kids ministry does more than, definitely not more than twice in a month, and most of them only once in a month. My wife and daughters are part of that team once a month. But what's the point there? Shared responsibility of enough people sharing the responsibility for all those things on a Sunday so that people have the mental, emotional, relational space to be able to invest out there in other people and other places. So, thoughts or questions about any of that, including you, Tyler? What do you think of that 1/3 idea, Tyler?
I like the idea of a third. And I think that looks different. Like, you could invest your hours in worship more if you were more into that and less into other areas. But I think we're getting to a place where we have systems in place to do it at about a third. So that's the good news. The bad news was it took a whole lot of work and time, to get it to a place where it's like, okay, now this kind of runs itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we're on the simpler side of church, especially in Oklahoma. But yeah, I think because that's what happens, is everybody only has so many hours in a week. If you just talk about volunteers, you only have so many hours you can invest in a week. And so if you have to show up every week at 8:30 and you don't leave church until 1 because you serve every Sunday, then how are you going to invest relationally throughout the week?
Yep.
The flip side of that, though, is people hear that and then they'll be like, okay, I only want to serve once a month. And then they don't do anything to invest relationally outside of that.
But yeah, you can't. Yeah.
So I see a lot of that too. And
Yeah.
I would love, so, there is the old adage that 10% of the people do 90% of the work. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, I've usually heard 80/20, but whether it's 90/10 or 80/20 or 70/30, it's not good because anybody who's a follower of Christ is a servant, not a consumer. And you've got too many people, and I know enough about Oklahoma. There's a lot of consumers, a lot of church consumers. Think the church exists for them to come get their spiritual product, you know, their spiritual latte on a Sunday, and are not being called to. There's not the expectation for them to be seriously engaged in serving, being a servant, and in helping make disciples and in helping reach the lost. Like, I hope, again, Thrive has this expectation and talks in this way to say, hey, everybody, if you're here, here's our expectations for what you will become. It's okay if you're not there yet, but just so you know, we believe a Jesus follower looks like this. A Jesus follower stewards their life in this way. So if you're going to be part of Thrive and part of this family, to be a good part of the family, you share responsibility. My 8-year-old little son, he's got chores to do. Everybody's got chores. That's what, we do Saturday chores. It's what the family does. It's what a good family does. Share responsibility, work together to create a healthy family. Everybody connected with Thrive has to do the same thing. But you've got to talk about that expectation again, even more so probably in a place like Oklahoma, because that has not been the expectation many times. A lot of churches don't think this way, don't talk this way. So they're totally fine with people consuming. They're totally fine with teeing up use this language, spiritual latte every Sunday, just so people can come and enjoy and consume and then go home. It's like that is so not New Testament, you know. I almost cringe
Here's
thinking
my
about it.
question.
Like, so, so you've got to, again, week in and week out, in all the communication you guys do throughout your whole system, you've got to be setting those expectations and talking about those expectations, keeping each other accountable to those expectations. And it's not because of shame or guilt or performance or anything else. Man, it's because of Jesus. Jesus died so that his followers could live that way and become like him. Showing up on a Sunday to consume, how does that, how does that look like Jesus in any way?
So I really like what you're talking about because it almost sets up a mission statement for the individual of goals to achieve. And then, if you outline these attributes that are Christ-like and attach supporting Bible verses to them, I don't know. I just feel like it changes it for people. It makes it more personal, adds accountability, adds a goal to strive for. Obviously, all of us are going to fall short of it at times, but like you're saying, if the expectation isn't known, there's no goal for people to even shoot for.
Yep. Yep. And if you're, I like that. Thanks for that comment. If you're specific in the expectations, then people have clarity. I mean, you guys know this. We do this. We do this in all. We do this at work, at school, for fitness. We've got specific goals that we're working towards, and we get help for some of those goals. And we um, have people keep us accountable to those goals. And um, I think Jesus expects the same. Seems like how he functioned with his disciples, as we look at the Gospels. But those expectations have to be really clear rather than just the generic, yeah, we're a church that makes disciples. Okay. What's that mean? First, let's clearly define what is a mature disciple. Like you just said, has that been defined? If we were to define maturity, what would that look like? Okay. What process then would be required to accomplish that? If our goal is to lose 20 pounds or to run a marathon next year, you put a process in place that's going to accomplish that goal, right? Church has got to do the same. Okay. Goal is mature disciple. Here's the defining marks we believe. Here's a process and a structure required to accomplish that, which is connected to our topic today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, what you're describing is almost exactly how it works with, new hires inside of a business.
Absolutely. So I'm dumbfounded often because I work with so many churches that have bright people that do this kind of goal setting and expectations and process. They do it at workplace. They do it for their education, as they get their masters or whatever. They do it for their kids and how to parent well. They do it in all these other areas of life. And then when we get to the church, it's kind of like we get dumb. It's like, why aren't we thinking that intentionally in terms of disciple making or reaching our neighbors? Or can't we bring some of that same thoughtful, careful, intentional, can't we bring some of that into our relationships? So the relationships inside the church are healthier and relationships with those outside the church are healthier. So absolutely, we've got to. And again, the motivation isn't to be corporate or business-like or copy, but it's to take seriously Jesus' command to make disciples with all of your life. Like let's take it as serious as we do striving for that job promotion. Or let's take it as seriously as we do trying to get that master's degree. Or let's as trying to get ready for that marathon. Let's take it at least that seriously. Jesus is worth actually way more than that, but let's at least do that. If we can put that kind of intentionality into getting a master's degree, parenting our kids, running a marathon, uh, you know, making money for the vacation, we can put that much thought into that. Man, can't we at least put that much into being a church that makes mature disciples, not churchgoers? Because that's actually the goal of most churches, even though they might say disciple making. Well, if you look at what they do, they're really just trying to make consistent churchgoers.
Yeah, so that's one thing I wanted to touch on, Todd, because I know how Oklahoma is and what people kind of think when you start thinking about mature disciples. Most churches have a statement, like, hey, we want you to serve on Sundays. We want you to participate, probably say join a small group, Bible study, community group, whatever. We want you to give regularly. And that's usually kind of the three.
Yep.
And that, which makes a good churchgoer, or I would say even like a good like family member in the church. Like I think that's a good like minimum expectation. But it's not if you do those three things, you won't be a good follower of Jesus. But you will be a good
That's still baby quality maturity.
And what's interesting, though, is that churches here actually struggle to get people to do those simple things.
Totally agree. That's what our churches are filled with babies. Our churches are filled with babies. That's why Paul said, why are you still milk drinkers? You're supposed to be meat eaters. You should be meat eaters by now. Paul would say the same thing, I believe, to most of our churches today. It's like, where are the meat eaters? I see a bunch of babies, where are the meat eaters? And so, yeah, what you described, Tyler, minimum, I mean, those aren't bad things, obviously. Man, tithing or, giving, serving in the kids ministry, love it. Part of a Bible study, love it. Those are still minimal. So how do we get beyond that? I mean, let's shift gears a little bit. And basically I laid out these three different relational, and it says three essential structures, but I like talking about them as three relational environments. Relationships happen in different ways in each of these three. I already mentioned what happens on Sunday morning. Okay, come into a bigger group. There's more people there, men and women there, older, younger there, all of that. And so that unique things happen with a bigger group of people like that. Okay. Missional community, then, that's smaller 8, 10, 12, 14 adults, plus kids sometimes, if they have kids, maybe not. Could be singles. That's fine too. 8, 10, 12. Very different, right? Very different relational dynamic. Smaller, more intimate. More people are going to be able to talk. You get into a big group, there's only time for a handful of people to talk. You get 8, 10, 12 people in your living room or at the park or in your backyard, and most everybody gets a chance to talk. Most everybody gets a chance to ask questions. Most everybody gets a chance to participate, which we really need. Okay. So again, we can talk more about that. We can come back to that. So it's unique with what can happen there. What about this third environment? Why do we need that? Because I have lots of churches say, man, like Sundays, love Sundays. And like the small group size, what is this little thing you're talking about? Why do you need that? Well, I hope you read that little bit. We desperately need that because it's small, 3 to 4, maximum 5. Because it's small and you can get deep and vulnerable and accountable with each other. When it's 3, 4, 5 women together, 3, 4, 5 men together, you can relate in ways you would never relate in any other situation. It's small, it's personal, it's vulnerable, it's accountable. It's just women with women, obviously makes it unique. That's not going to happen on Sunday. That's not going to happen in missional community. There's men around, okay? Or men with men, same thing. Certain things are going to happen there that can only happen there because it's only men and it's small. There's lots of things that men are only going to talk about there that they would not talk about anywhere else, right? Same with women. Women are not going to, certain women in certain situations with certain issues are not going to talk about it with a group of 10 women. They would with a group of 3 women or 4 women. Is that right? I should ask the 2 women here. Shotzi, yeah. Sammy, you agree? Okay. Heartily, I hope. I don't know how you,
I agree. Sorry, I was trying
Shotzi,
to figure out how to work my phone.
I don't know how you heartily agree. Something better than a strong, maybe a muscle, something stronger than a thumbs up. Okay. There you
Yes.
go. The double, yep. But you guys get it. So much important stuff happens in these DNAs in the smaller environment that cannot happen anywhere else.
Todd, I have a question for you on that. Um, with those DNA groups, what goes into the process of picking who you would walk through that group with? Because just because of the nature of the group, it seems like it'd be a pretty tender covenant to be joining into, to be spending that much time and that much vulnerability with one another. I would think you'd want to have somebody that you knew was going to be reliable and not, in and out of it, or not willing to open up, or is, you know what I mean?
Yep. Great question. Couple things. I think we need to apply. I think there's a God's sovereignty in this comes into play. And our conviction about the family dynamic, the family of God. So actually, from my experience, and I've seen this play out all over, I mean, many different churches, but the DNAs are a subset of your missional community. That might scare you a little bit, Zach. Like, it's like, I don't know if I would want to DNA with those guys. I would rather have those guys over there. I don't know if I can trust him. Or I don't know if, you ladies, I don't know if I could trust her. Again, God's sovereignty and family, like believing that God has placed you in that community so that you guys can love each other, serve each other, shape each other. And some of what you need is going to come from the people that you maybe in the beginning are least likely to like. I'll say it like that. Okay? And that's why God has you together. You need to be shaped in such a way. You need to learn to love them in such a way, extend grace to them in such a way that you wouldn't if it was with 2 easy people, like your 2 favorite people in the city. Now, I want to be in DNA with them. If it was easy, you probably wouldn't get nearly as much out of it as you need to. And it's not about us. A big part of discipleship is the dying to self and realizing that we gain Jesus said it, right? When do we gain the most? When we lose our life. So sometimes in a DNA, I might meet for 2 hours with my guys, and that night has nothing to do with me. We don't have time to talk about me, my life at all, not a minute. Okay, because there was stuff going on in those guys' lives that we needed to really think about, talk about, pray about that night. But guess what? That's okay. We didn't talk about me that week. By thinking, talking, praying, serving those guys, I actually gained more than if the night would have been about me. Because I learned to serve. I learned to listen. I learned to love. I learned to speak truth. I learned all those things that night, even though we had zero conversation about it. Does that make sense? So, man, this DNA thing, I don't know if you guys have done much with this yet. I cannot overemphasize it enough. Like, it's a big deal. The stuff that happens there, the richness of the relationship, it's, yeah, really good and really important. And we all need it. So it's not like, okay, who should be in a DNA? Everybody. Anybody who's consistent with your church, even if they're not consistent to a missional community yet, you could actually pull them into a DNA. Sometimes DNA is the door into a missional community, not the other way around. Many times it's the other way around. Missional community will form, and then they'll have like 3 or 4 men and 6 or 7 women. So they'll form 1 men's DNA from that and 2 women's DNAs. Does that make sense? Those numbers? I said 3 or 4 men, 6 or 7 women. We've had that happen a lot of times, just because you guys know usually more women are in the church than men are. And so that is statistically true. So often we'll have a missional community that has 1 DNA for men, 2 DNAs for women. But get this, okay? These aren't like this is a big point. These aren't like separate things. What happens at Sunday, what happens in your missional community, what happens in your DNA. Part of the beauty of this and the power of this is the integration of it. These 3 relational environments will produce much fruit in people's lives when people are engaging all 3 in an integrated way. Does that make sense? So you could even imagine, okay, I'll just talk about a normal week. So our DNAs meet every other Wednesday. So the guys meet 2 Wednesdays a month. The women meet 2 Wednesdays a month. They rotate because that's the only way we can make childcare happen. It'd be too expensive otherwise if we were trying to do. But for this season, we've determined we're going to DNA men twice a month, women twice a month, Wednesday evenings, rotating. Okay. So that men, okay, first and third are home taking care of the kids. So the women can be DNAing. Other Wednesdays, women are doing it so the men can be. But imagine you have this 2 hours together with these guys or with your gals. And then on Saturday, somebody has a birthday party and you're at the park together and you're experiencing that. So you do DNA on Wednesday and you got a birthday party on Saturday. Imagine what's going to happen when you show up on Sunday morning. What do you think that's going to feel like? Tell me. What do you think?
It'll be exciting because you're seeing your best friends 3 and 4 times a week.
Exactly. And was that hard what I just described? Wednesday night DNA twice a month, Saturday birthday party or frisbee or volleyball at the park, and then Sunday morning. Sunday is not going to be, we're going to church. Yeah, we're going to attend church. How many times have you heard that in your life? No, man, we're going to meet with family again. These people are family. We're in deep relationship with these people. It looks one way on Wednesdays. It looks another way when we throw parties, eat meals, go to the park. It looks that way other times. And then, man, when we show up on Sundays, it is the family reunion. Make
Can I ask a
Sundays
question?
make Sundays a very different experience for people. When Sunday feels like a family reunion, not a church event. See a difference? But that's the integration of these three relational environments: DNA, missional community, Sunday morning. Sorry, go ahead. Question.
With the DNA groups, so this is actually something I hadn't had a name to it, but this type of intimacy is something that I've been craving personally. This is a safe space, right? We can be completely honest and transparent here.
I hope so.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm not sure why we're meeting.
So I really desire to have this kind of open, completely open and honest, intimate relationship with men in our church. My hesitancy, and this could just be a personal problem, so don't be, hesitant to just tell me this is a personal problem. Our church, probably like a lot of churches, has a real gossip issue. And so for me personally, I really have a difficult time wanting to open myself up to people with the track record of things having been spread around the church before.
Yep. Very fair, very real. So gossip is obviously a gospel issue. So if that exists, then Tyler and all of you have some work to do, some gospel work. So needs to be talked about. Need to be open, honest about it, and just say, hey, family, yeah, this is how family relates. This is how family communicates. Gossip is not an option. Talking behind people's backs. You go to the person, you got an issue. Always, every time, every single time. Gossip, not an option. If gossip happens, we're going to confront it every time. People need to hear that. If you gossip, it's a Jesus issue. We're going to confront it. We're going to speak truth into why it happened, how to not let it happen again. So, but when you establish these DNAs, that's something that Tyler and the rest of you can do. You basically need to clearly define, and I will actually send you a DNA tool after this, which will give you some guardrails or some suggestions, but you basically need to set some ground rules. One of those ground rules obviously being anything that gets talked about in the DNA stays in the DNA, including you can't talk about it with your spouses unless you've asked for permission. It literally, you do not talk with anybody about it. If you do, we will, in a gospel way, speaking truth with grace, we will confront it and say, wait, we set those ground rules. And then I heard you talking about this with them and like what happened there, So you set very clear ground rules, healthy communication patterns, and then you get going, and the DNAs will learn and will grow according to those expectations and those ground rules. And you could have somebody gossip again. Gossip's a heart issue. So it's probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen sometimes. And um, you approach it again with grace and truth and say, no, we had those ground rules. We made this commitment to each other. We talked about being a family that speaks truth and doesn't go behind people's backs. Remember all those things we talked about? Yep. Seems like you got off there. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about why it happened. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. Okay.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm parenting right now. This is how I talk to my 5 kids. And there's so many parallels actually. This is like spiritual parenting actually. DNA is, and so it's like spiritual parenting, except we're peer parenting. So but it's very similar. So sorry, go ahead. Somebody was gonna say something.
Yeah, it just I just wanted to point out one thing is like the best place to have that conversation is actually in DNA groups when you're that close with somebody. So it's like what comes first, Sonny, the chicken or the egg? It's like you have to put yourself in that situation, be vulnerable, hear the person gossip, have those ground rules, and then have that conversation.
Good.
And we're missing DNA groups. And so just for a little bit, so we've tried to start them 3 times in 4 years. And guess what happens? Nobody shows up. And so Zach is our pastoral resident for the next 18 months. He's been in a 5-person intentional discipleship group. And his project is to launch
Awesome.
discipleship groups / DNA groups
Awesome.
in the church. That's why he's asking so many questions. And it's interesting because people don't typically gossip around me because I'm the pastor and they know that I'll say something about it. And so I get a lot of phone calls about these sorts of situations from people. And then it's the pastors, they're wanting the pastor to call. And then that's really weird because I wasn't even there. And so my encouragement for all of you is you're mature enough Christians to have that conversation with them if it happens around you.
Yeah.
Don't call me unless it's a continual issue. And there's biblical precedent for that.
Hey, yep, love that. So you want to talk about hear a cool thing when you start organizing like this and DNAing like this, any pastoral issue, any issue that comes up, what you can start doing then, and Tyler, this is big for you, is say, I would love to talk about that issue with you and your DNA. I won't talk about that issue with you without your DNA. Because I can't keep you accountable to what we talk about, but your DNA can. If you come to me and we have this conversation about something, whatever, sexual or substance or gossip or whatever it is, like I can't track all that after our conversation. Your DNA can. So guess what? I'd love to talk about it with you, with your DNA. Let's hop on a little video call together. We'll work it out together because they're the ones that are going to need to keep you accountable and help you going forward. I can't. So pastorally, it's amazing because now you have, I don't know, you've got this little, it also functions like a little counseling group. Does that make sense? So we've often in counseling situations, marital counseling or whatever the counseling thing was, we would often say, you know what? We think you need some counseling. We would love to play a part of that and include at least one person from your DNA. Because you need somebody walking it out with you. Does that make sense, guys? You see the potential of these DNAs? Like massive. Massive.
Todd,
So,
I got another question for you, man.
sorry, well, let me say one more thing, and this is actually for you, Zach.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say that Tyler and the leadership, all of you, like, this is one of those expectation things where it's like, if you're part of Thrive, you're part of a DNA. We're not asking. If you're part of this family, to be part of the family means you are committed to Sunday, committed to a missional community, committed to a DNA. It's just how we roll. We believe that's how healthy relationships happen. It wouldn't be good. We wouldn't be good stewards if we could say, yeah, just show up on Sunday. We wouldn't be a good steward. Or if we said, just show up on Sunday and just sometimes be part of this missional community. We're not being good stewards of you. God's given us responsibility for you to disciple you and shepherd you. So we believe that looks like Sunday missional community DNA. So, man, Tyler, you gotta that's a hill to die on. That is a hill to die on. Say, if you're not, so this is getting into actually, so a lot of churches I work with them, that's how they would define membership. You call yourself a member here and part of the Thrive family, that's what you're committing to. If you're not ready to commit to that, totally fine. You're just not part of the family yet as a member. Does that make sense? You'll be friends of the family. We're still going to love you, and that's not changing. But in terms of like being a member of the family, it requires these three relational commitments. So, you think that's too radical? What do you guys think?
Not at all. I think if you want to, further your life and your relationship with Jesus and your community, it takes effort. I mean, it's like work, sports, losing weight,
Everything.
getting promoted to the corporate ladder. Like it doesn't just happen because you showed up. So yes.
Good. Yep.
Quick question. My name's Cody. Sorry about last week.
Hey, Cody.
I was a little tech unsavvy, I guess, and mute and all that stuff problems. But hey, I did have one question after last week. Like, you've been doing this forever. How has your wife played a role in all this with you together and having a missional community? I mean, is she like 100% on board with you all the time, or is she kind of like, why are you bringing your friends over to my house every week?
I married an all-star. So she's an extroverted evangelist. Her spiritual gifting is evangelist shepherd. And so all of this we're talking about, like she just kills it. A lot of the non-Christians that are connected to our missional community are because of her, because everywhere she goes, she's meeting people and inviting people. And so it energizes her. I'm an introvert by nature, and so I can throw a party and have people over for 3 hours, but then I need to like retreat. I need to crash. She could just do it again and again and again. Okay, let's do it again tomorrow night. Okay, let's do it again. She could, she could just keep going because relationship energizes her. So, but that, and we can talk about that on a future call. Gifting and personality plays into all of this. Obviously, your missional community and your DNA, you're going to have extroverts and introverts, and they're going to engage it differently. Okay, and then gifting, like I said, she's an evangelist. You're going to have people that are more teaching leaning or shepherding leaning. And so that's part of the beauty of this. You get the diversity of gifting and the diversity of personality and the diversity of our stories. Some of your people grew up in a big city. Some grew up in a small town. Some grew up on a farm. Some of them grew up, went to big high school, some went to small high school. Man, that's part of the richness of living life like this, is that all of our stories and gifting and personality gets woven together, and we shape each other. Our stories shape each other. Our gifting shapes each other. But these structures we're talking about, if you don't have these, that won't happen because people are not living enough intimate life together, which is the case in most churches. This that formation I'm describing, that woven together, that's only going to happen if you're living a fair amount of life together in each other's homes, helping each other, at different times with house projects or kid things, or when people are sick, providing meals. Somebody's car breaks down and uh, drive their kids to sports practice. Just like, it's all of that life together that forms us to be those mature, Jesus-like people. But in most churches, the expectation is just show up at the church on a Sunday, maybe a Bible study. That's not life together. That's like formal program together. We're talking about a different quality of life, different quality of relationship. So anyway, Zach, I don't know. It seems like Tyler is tasking you and giving you permission to like raise the bar and say, we're going to start expecting and talking about it in this way at Thrive, and saying, hey, everybody, we're family, and family functions in this way and relates in this way. And that requires us meeting in these different relational spaces. And DNA is one of those. So we're going to help everybody understand DNA, start functioning in a DNA, believing that it's going to produce much spiritual fruit in each of our lives. But your people have to hear that it's not another program. It's not another meeting. Don't talk about it like that, okay? DNA is a relational commitment. Does that make sense? It's a relational commitment between those people that are already relating in their missional community, and then sometimes relate on Sunday mornings. But it's a way of relating. It's a relational commitment to say, I'm going to support you, encourage you, pray for you, speak truth to you, listen to you when you need it. I'm committing to that because we are committing to the flourishing of each other.
Todd, I had a question, kind of a philosophical question about, you're talking about making those three things a requirement to be part of the family. And in doing stuff like that, to me, it would be a good thing to make being lukewarm in the church very uncomfortable. I don't know if that's necessarily correct, or if it's better just to let people be there and get them to stay for as long as possible until the Holy Spirit moves something in them. But
so, yeah, people are going to stick around for a while. But Jesus was constantly raising the bar, right, guys? Jesus had no problem like letting people go. Think of how many different times he did it. Think of how many different ways he did it. Hey, everybody, you ready to die and lay down your life and pick up a cross? Like he said hard things. He said hard things all the time. Told his disciples, hey guys, are these things too hard for you? He even like made it that clear. Is what I'm saying right now too hard for you? And they said no. We believe you're the Christ. So again, we do it with grace. We do it with hope, hoping that people's hearts will get gripped by Jesus. So, but we keep the bar high, and we tell them, hey, here's what it looks like to be a member of at Thrive. Keep coming around, keep learning. We're not gonna stop calling you to this though. You will get to if you're you will get tired of hearing us talk about these things, because we're going to talk about these things like often. So, and people will, some of them will get on board slower than others. And then some of them will say, you know what? I mean, we have people literally, I had people tell me this. They said, man, we've been around your community, we've been around the church for a year, love so much about it, but we just want to go to church. They actually use that language. This extra stuff you're talking about, like, we just want to go to church. So we're going to go to a church. We're going to go find a church where that is all the expectations. And man, it was a bummer. We really liked them. We spent a lot of time with them actually that year. Our kids did. Our kids were good friends. And they finally got to the point where they said, man, we just want to go to church on our terms that fits our schedule. Tired of being called to make disciples. Tired of hearing about being a missionary. Tired of hearing about loving our neighbors. We don't want to hear those things anymore. So, so you're going to have those, and that's okay.
Yeah,
That's
and
okay.
people will be all in this like different stages. Like I've had people that, I mean, there's people that will be in DNA and community group and come to church, and they'll like all of those structures, and still you might say, oh, well, I don't know if they're really growing. Like I've seen that in people too. And so we can't, like, I wouldn't ever take someone's progress and judge it, because you never know what God's doing deep on the side. So I just want to balance that thought
That's
a little
good.
bit.
That's good.
And then before we wrap up, I kind of want to circle back to Cody's question a little bit, just because I think his situation is, well, do you want to just actually explain the situation, Cody, or you want me to a little bit more?
Well, I can. I mean, to your point, my wife, let me put it also, because her best friend's on this phone call, Chauncey here. So, I mean, my wife is a rock star. Don't get me wrong. I know you're not saying she's not. There's nothing about her at all. She has given birth for someone else and carried that child because God told her to, for someone that lost a child. And
Awesome.
I was against it for a long time. It took me a long time to get on board. I didn't have a relationship with God till probably 2020. And missional community probably, and God, missional community, God saved my life. I was one of the kids struggling because of COVID, and I do not like being alone. But yeah, so the missional community that I host, I won't say it's mine or I lead it. It's just it's hosted at my house. We've been doing it. We were the second people to kind of jump in after Chauncey and Tyler, because after I found God, I said I'm all in, and whatever I can do, if it's having a house or reading a piece of paper, that's what we're doing, and that's what we're doing. My wife is awesome and has never said like we're not going to do it, but there are times where when people come to my house every Thursday, with the exception of 2 to 3 month break we take in summer, that may get a little old and burdensome on a lady that works 2 jobs and has 3 kids and a husband.
Yeah.
So every Thursday over and over, sometimes it's like, hey, your friends are coming over. And she is in the meeting. She's not the meeting. She is a participant. She helps make food. She gets the house ready. but sometimes I feel like she's not all in.
Yep.
And I don't know. Tyler, can you explain any better?
Yeah, so the only thing I would add is because you now have 3 under 5, there's a lot of times where she's like in the discussion, in the time for a little bit, but then the kids start acting crazy, and so she has to help with them. And
She
so
doesn't get her cup filled ever, for sure.
yeah, so basically she's like sort of in the conversation, but she ends up having to help with the kids, and so they have this struggle where she doesn't really
Yep.
get to participate.
Very normal stuff, Cody. Very normal stuff. First of all, it's early days. You guys are still on the front end of the learning curve. Okay. So lots of grace there. Second thing, man, if you've got three kids under 5, it's like that's a unique season. Lots of grace there. Okay. But it seems like one of the things, and we can do this, we're going to do this on a later call, but maybe we should do it on the next call. Maybe you should pull your wife into it too. But you've got a good, healthy missional community has to share responsibility better and share the hospitality better than what I hear from you. You guys should not be hosting every week. Like nobody should be hosting every week. That's not okay. That's not good family. Even yeah. So one of the thing, if one family is doing all the hosting and it's at their house all the time, it's preventing the others actually from growing in hospitality, which is one of the main things people need to grow in if they're going to be good missionaries. I mean, hospitality is like it. You know, if you're going to be a good missionary, like knowing how to host, throw a good party, throw a good meal, help people feel cared for. Like even the singles in your church have to learn to do that soon. This isn't just a married thing. Singles in your church have to. So you've got to find ways to share responsibility. And so my gospel community right now, we call them gospel communities. We do what we call a family meal night just twice in a month. So not every Thursday. We do them on Sunday nights, twice in a month. And we host, again, we try to share that with another family. So it means it's only in our home once a month or maximum twice a month, which that's very manageable. 4 times a month, that sounds crushing. And so, especially for your wife with 3 kids under 5, especially.
One's 6 weeks old.
Yeah. So, so anyway, got to figure out I talk with churches about creating sustainable rhythms. What you just described to me is not sustainable.
Yeah.
You need a sustainable rhythm that is life-giving to your wife, not life-sucking. Sounds like it's sucking some of the joy and sucking some of the life out of her. That's not good family.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's definitely a little different in my eyes. So I will have to talk to some people and see if we can get some help.
And again, we share, good family shares responsibility for all of it, for food prep and cleanup and childcare. Like if you've got singles, that doesn't give them like your singles need to be helping with taking care of the kids. It's actually going to help them become good, better parents someday. So your singles need to be helping, not like, oh, only the parents get to, do those things. Family, sharing responsibility. But again, this isn't just logistical stuff we're talking about. I hope you're hearing that. Like to help people become mature disciples of Jesus, they've got to grow in biblical hospitality. That's a qualification of an elder, by the way. You guys know that? So hospitality is a qualification for an elder, and hospitality and how it is defined is an open home, and an open home not only to those inside the family, the church, but those outside the family. outside the church. So, based on that definition, which is the biblical definition of hospitality, a whole lot of elders and a whole lot of churches are not qualified. That's a fact. It's a biblical fact. They are not qualified based on that because they do not have an open home, oftentimes even to Christians, right? And for sure not to non-Christians. How many elders and churches you are aware of have an open home, an open fridge, an open table, and have lost neighbors there sometimes, right? So again, the point is we want to, as you think about the people in your church, we want everybody to grow up in biblical hospitality. They're going to be better family as they do that. They're going to be better missional people as they do that. Because then you have a whole army of people that can throw a good party. You can have a whole army of people that can host a good Super Bowl party. You can have a whole army of people that can throw a good Christmas meal. You can have a whole army of people, not just a few of you. Your church is not going to grow very, very big or influence many people if all the hosting and hospitality sits in the homes of a few of you. It will stifle your growth. So I don't know if that's true for you and Chauncey too, Tyler, but
so we do have we host a lot of things, like, so we host like the family meal every Thursday, but we've stopped doing like game night or any of those things at our house, and we let other people host it.
okay.
And a word of encouragement to you, Cody, is that part of my hope for these conversations is that we will start to engage the city with the gospel in our missional community groups a couple times a month. And so you'd be doing that on a Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Tuesday, whatever it works out to be that week, instead of hosting someone in your home. And that all being said, I love and agree with and think it's a brilliant idea, and would love to even, have it at Zach's house sometimes, those kinds of things for our group. There's nothing getting around having a conversation with your amazing wife about how you guys can be in it together. So I know you, and I know you're looking for ways to like not have that conversation, and you just need to have it. Like we've already talked about.
Yeah. And Cody and everybody, like, we're doing this step-by-step process, talking about these things. By the end of this process, a lot of this is going to be even more clear. You're going to have even more confidence. You're going to have more ideas, and it's going to feel it's going to feel better. It's going to feel easier. But I am going to push you, because I push churches in this way all over the world. You've got to find sustainable ways to do this, to be good family as a community, and then to be on mission together. It is possible, because I see it all over the world. So it is possible, but you got to talk about, what does sustainability look like for your specific community. You can't cookie cutter this thing. Cody, your group's going to look different than Tyler's group. And when you guys multiply out, the next group's going to look different than that group. And every group has different dynamics and different circumstances. So sustainability is going to look different for each one. But that's what you figure out together with the core leaders of each of the communities. What's sustainability look like for us in this season? So awesome conversation, I think. Hopefully you got some good, encouraging next thoughts and steps. I am going to actually right now, as I get off this call, I'm going to send you a little DNA resource which is going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of the quality of the relationship. So I think you will be helped by that, and we'll keep going next call. Can I pray again? Father, thanks for my brothers and sisters there, and just for their desire to love you and love others and serve others and see people grow to maturity. So thank you for their heart, and I pray that you would continue to grow their hearts. As we start living life like this with people in deep and vulnerable ways, it's not it's not always clean and easy. It's actually probably going to feel quite messy. But that's the point. That's how we grow and mature, is in the mess. But man, give us motivation to live this way. Give us um, just deep passion and compassion for people, both people inside the church and outside the church. So I pray that, I pray that for these guys and for the whole church. And I pray that just this conversation we had about expectations and just that it would really, you would help these guys gain clarity about the expectations you're calling them to, and then give them boldness to call people to it and not shrink back um, from calling people to the ways of Jesus. So, Father, thanks for loving us. Thank you that we are your sons and daughters, and we have nothing to prove in all of this. We get to do this. We get to live this way freely, and to let you be responsible for the fruit, but help us to be good stewards of the people and the time and the resources you've given us. So, Father, thanks for loving us so well. We love you and pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Good stuff, guys.